A family torn apart by greed. A child with a forgiving heart. Can forgiveness heal everything? Follow the story to the end to feel the power of love and second chances. Toronto was immersed in the chill of winter. Snowflakes fell slowly onto rooftops, adorned with twinkling lights, their shimmering glow reflecting through the windows of luxurious homes. Inside a grand villa, the Christmas spirit filled the air with laughter, vibrant gift boxes, and the rich aroma of cinnamon cookies. Yet amidst this warm scene, a small heart quietly endured a piercing coldness. Sophie, an 8-year-old girl with soft blonde hair and clear blue eyes, stepped into the living room with an eager heart. In her hands, she held a handmade card, its scribbled letters brimming with affection. "To my dear Grandma, Merry Christmas!" But as Sophie stood there, waiting for a moment of love in return, she gradually realized a painful truth. Her name was never called. Brightly wrapped gifts were passed around, each child squealing with delight as they tore through the paper. Laughter echoed throughout the room. But Sophie stood still, her small hands clutching the card so tightly that its edges crumpled. Her eyes welled up as she looked at her loved ones, none of whom looked back at her. Olivia, Sophie's mother, quickly noticed the injustice. Her heart ached as she saw her daughter overlooked in her own family. She turned to her husband, Ethan, who was watching everything unfold with darkened eyes. Olivia tried to stay calm, but her voice trembled as she spoke. "Mom, why didn't Sophie get a gift?" The room seemed to freeze. All eyes turned to Olivia, then quickly darted away. Grandma Diane, a woman with elegant silver hair, set her teacup down on the table, gave a faint smile, and said, "The gifts are only for the children who deserve them." Those words dropped into the air like a sharp blade. Sophie stood stunned. Olivia felt as though someone had just crushed her heart. Ethan gripped his wife's hand tightly, his eyes flashing with anger. Silence enveloped the room. No one dared to object. Their relatives, people who were supposed to love Sophie, either bowed their heads or pretended to be busy with the gifts in their hands. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second stretching into eternity. The fire in the hearth flickered, but it couldn't dispel the coldness creeping into the hearts of the little family of 3. Sophie lowered her head, tears brimming in her eyes. She didn't understand why she wasn't worthy. She didn't understand why they didn't love her. The feeling of abandonment overwhelmed her tender soul. Olivia could bear it no longer. She stood up and pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. She didn't care about manners or tradition. Her daughter didn't deserve this treatment. She wouldn't let Sophie suffer for another moment. Ethan draped his arm around his wife and daughter, his gaze fixed on his mother. "We're leaving," he said, his voice low and resolute, leaving no room for hesitation. No one stopped them. The heavy door trembled as it closed, the sound reverberating through the quiet space. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the streets in white. The family of 3 stepped away from the house, walking into the cold night. But in each other's arms, they found true warmth. For Sophie, this Christmas wasn't about extravagant gifts or dazzling lights. It was the first time she understood that love didn't come from material things. It came from those who truly cherished and protected her. As the night deepened and the biting wind cut through the air, Olivia and Ethan walked slowly, shielding Sophie in their embrace. No one spoke, but they understood each other. The hurt lingered, but their family's love would soothe it all. Sophie looked up at her mother with wide, innocent eyes. "Mom, did I do something wrong?" Olivia knelt down, gently brushing her daughter's hair. "No, my love, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people forget what matters most. Love isn't something you can measure with gifts." Ethan added, his voice warm and steady, "You don't have to prove anything, Sophie. We love you, and that's what matters most." Sophie nodded, a warmth spreading through her little heart. They paused in front of a small cafe, still open late. Olivia smiled softly. "Shall we go inside for some hot chocolate?" Sophie's eyes lit up as she cheered, "Yes!" Inside, the golden glow of the lights enveloped them. The server brought 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, the sweet scent of cocoa filling the air. Sophie took a sip, the warmth flowing through her fingertips. Ethan looked at his daughter and smiled. "Would you like to open a little gift from Mom and Dad?" Sophie's eyes widened in surprise. Really? I have a gift? Olivia laughed, pulling a small, carefully wrapped box from her coat pocket. Sophie unwrapped it gently, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. It's a symbol of our love for you, Olivia said. No matter what happens, you'll always be our greatest treasure. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. I love you both so much. Olivia and Ethan pulled their daughter into a warm embrace. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but now, in the hearts of this little family, there was only the warmth of love and an unbreakable bond. Outside the window, Ottawa lay shrouded in the thick fog of winter. Snow blanketed the streets, and the streetlights glimmered through a thin layer of ice, creating a scene both serene and frigid. Inside Olivia and Ethan's cozy home, the atmosphere was entirely different. It was heavy, tense, like a taut string on the verge of snapping. Olivia sat on the sofa, holding a bank statement, the cold numbers staring back at her. She had made up her mind this time. She wouldn't endure it any longer. We have to end this, Ethan, she said, her voice firm with resolve. Ethan, a tall man with dark hair, leaned against the kitchen counter, his eyes reflecting agreement. I know it's not easy for you, but we can't keep supporting them anymore. They don't value you, Olivia. They only see you as a bank. Olivia gripped the paper tightly. For years, she had provided for her parents, believing she was helping them maintain a stable life. But in reality, they had used the money to indulge in extravagance, while treating their daughter like an outsider in her own family. Now, she could no longer deceive herself. Tomorrow I'll call them, Olivia sighed. I'll make it clear that from now on, they're on their own. Ethan nodded, stepping closer to place a hand on her shoulder. I'm here with you. You don't have to face this alone. The next morning, Olivia sat in her home office, phone in hand. After a few rings, her mother Diane's familiar voice came through. Olivia, darling, I just had an idea. We could rent a vacation home for the summer. What do you think? You could help with the deposit, couldn't you? Olivia took a deep breath, her heart tightening. No greetings, no concern for her feelings. Just money. Mom, Olivia said, keeping her voice steady, I'm calling to tell you that I won't be sending any more money. You and Dad need to take care of yourselves from now on. A long silence stretched over the line before Diane's voice turned icy. Olivia, you can't do this to your own parents. We raised you, and this is how you repay us? Mom, I've done everything I could to help this family for years, but all I've gotten in return is indifference. I can't keep doing this. You'll regret this, Olivia. She bit her lip, tears threatening to spill, but she refused to let herself weaken. Have a good day, Mom. She hung up, feeling an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. While Olivia dealt with her family, Ethan uncovered another issue just as serious. The real estate company run by his wife's family showed irregularities in its financial reports. Missing funds, suspicious transactions. One name kept appearing, Victoria Olivia's sister. He approached Olivia as she stepped out of her office. Olivia, you need to see this. He placed a stack of documents in front of her. Something's wrong with your family's company. Victoria's been siphoning money from the accounts for the past 3 years. Olivia's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. This is it real? Victoria's been embezzling? And it's not a small amount. Millions of dollars. Olivia's hands trembled. Victoria had always been the golden child, the one her parents adored and protected. No one in the family dared question her. But now, the truth was undeniable. We have to do something, Olivia said, her voice harder than ever. We need to investigate this fully. Ethan nodded. I've already contacted an accountant. We have a meeting tomorrow. The meeting with the accountant took place in a small but professional office in downtown Ottawa. The middle-aged woman with sharp eyes looked at Olivia over her glasses. Victoria executed some very sophisticated cover-ups, she said, but there are transactions she couldn't hide. I believe she's moved most of the money overseas. Olivia exhaled sharply. What can we do to stop her? We can report it to the authorities. But there's a problem. Victoria's gone. No one knows where she is. Olivia sat silently, trying to process the information. Her sister hadn't just betrayed the family company, she'd betrayed her trust. And now, she'd fled. That evening, as Olivia and Ethan sat in the living room, her phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed her mother's number. Olivia hesitated before answering. Mom? On the other end, Diane's voice was frantic. Olivia! You have to help your sister. Victoria's run off. We can't reach her. The police might get involved. You can't let this happen. Olivia closed her eyes, her breathing slowing. For years, she'd been the one to take responsibility for everything. But not this time. Mom, I can't help her. If she's committed a crime, she has to face the consequences. Olivia! Diane's voice choked. You can't do this. She's family. And what about me? I'm family too. But you've never put me first. Silence hung heavy, then Diane hung up. Olivia set the phone down and looked at Ethan. This time, I'm not turning a blind eye. Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with pride. Then we'll do what needs to be done. Outside, the snow still fell, but this time, Olivia no longer felt the cold. She was ready to face it all. Fluorescent lights flickered on the ceiling of Toronto's International Airport. A tense atmosphere hung over the security checkpoint, where hundreds of passengers lined up, awaiting their turn. A woman with wavy brown hair, dressed in a designer beige coat, pulled her sunglasses low over anxious eyes. She gripped her boarding pass tightly, her fingers trembling. Victoria glanced at her watch. Her flight to Dubai was less than an hour from departure. If she made it through security, she'd vanish. No one would find her amidst the skyscrapers of a foreign land. But fate had other plans. Attention passenger, Victoria Evans, please stop. A firm voice rang out from behind her. Victoria's heart plummeted. She tried to stay calm, turning around with an innocent expression. Is there a problem? Two uniformed officers approached, their gazes leaving no room for doubt. You're under arrest for financial fraud and embezzlement of company funds. We have a warrant for your arrest. Victoria's eyes widened in shock. No! This is a misunderstanding. She stepped back as if to flee, but the officers swiftly restrained her, locking her wrists in cold handcuffs. Onlookers stared, some whispering among themselves. Victoria, once pampered by her parents, once draped in luxury, now stood humiliated in the crowded airport, her head bowed. A month later, in Ontario's federal courthouse, Victoria sat on the defendant's bench, her head lowered. Her sunken eyes and disheveled hair were a far cry from her former polished self. Across from her, the prosecutor presented the case. The defendant embezzled over $5 million from her family's real estate company over 3 years, using the funds to purchase luxury properties, expensive jewelry, and extravagant vacations. Olivia sat in the gallery, her hand clasped tightly in Ethan's. She knew the truth, but hearing it laid bare in the courtroom still stung. This was her sister, the one her parents had always shielded, always loved above all else. And now, that favoritism had led to devastating consequences. The judge banged the gavel, his voice stern. Does the defendant have anything to say before sentencing? Victoria looked up at the judge, her eyes brimming with tears. After months of lies, she finally had no choice but the truth. I plead guilty, she choked out. I did wrong. I betrayed my family. I'm sorry. But an apology couldn't undo what was lost. Weeks later, the case dominated the media. The family's real estate company officially went bankrupt. Olivia's parents lost everything. Their lavish villa was seized, their luxury cars auctioned off to pay debts. Olivia watched the news on TV without a word. Images of her parents Diane and Richard standing in front of the home that once symbolized their wealth, now empty and desolate. Diane no longer carried her usual elegance. Her hair was unkempt, her face etched with exhaustion. The family's reputation is ruined, the reporter said through the screen. Luxuries couldn't buy back the trust they lost. Olivia turned off the TV. She didn't feel joy or sorrow, just emptiness. In the end, everything she'd once tried to hold onto family, honor, tradition had crumbled to dust. Ethan entered the room, carrying a stack of documents. I just spoke with the forensic accounting team. They need a few more files to finalize the case. Olivia nodded, her eyes still fixed on the blank screen. It's over, isn't it? Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. No, my love. This is the start of a new life. A life without lies, without burdens you had to carry alone. Olivia looked at her husband, her gaze softening. Will we be okay? He smiled, gentle but certain. We'll always be okay, because we have each other. That night, Sophie sat at her small desk, the soft glow of a lamp illuminating the fresh pages of her journal. She wrote, "Today, I saw Mom looking really sad." But she didn't cry. She just stared out the window quietly, like she was thinking a lot. Dad hugged her, and I know she'll be okay. But I'm worried about Jacob. He doesn't have his mom with him anymore. He doesn't have his dad either. Now he's with Grandma and Grandpa, but I think he'll feel really lonely. I hope someday he'll find happiness. Please don't let Mom be sad, and please don't let Jacob be alone. Sophie closed her journal and gazed out the window. The night sky sparkled with stars, quiet but full of hope. An old chapter had ended, and a new one was about to begin. The first rays of spring sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over Olivia and Ethan's new home. It wasn't large or extravagant like her parents' former villa, but it was filled with coziness and peace. In the kitchen, Olivia prepared breakfast, the smell of pancakes wafting through the air, mingling with Sophie's giggles from the living room. Ethan was fixing a wooden shelf, his steady hands producing rhythmic clacks, but then the doorbell rang, shattering the tranquil moment. Olivia paused, her heart skipping a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. Ethan glanced at his wife, noticing the flicker of worry in her eyes. He set down his hammer and headed to the door. As the door swung open, a faint breeze carried in the lingering chill of winter. Standing there were Robert and Diane. Gone were the expensive clothes and the proud demeanor of people who once held power and wealth. Now they looked gaunt, weary, their eyes brimming with regret. "Olivia!" Diane spoke first, her voice hoarse from months of loss. "Can we come in?" Olivia stood still for a moment, a flood of thoughts rushing through her mind. The pain, their coldness in the past, their indifference to Sophie. But then she took a deep breath and nodded. "Come in." Robert and Diane stepped inside, standing in the living room like lost souls. Ethan watched them but said nothing. He knew this was a conversation Olivia needed to handle herself. Diane clasped her hands tightly, looking at her daughter with anguished eyes. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. We were wrong. We let greed and pride blind us to the love of our family. It was only after losing everything that I realized what matters most in my life is you and Sophie." Robert, once a man of authority, was now just a quiet old man. He sighed, his voice raspy. "I don't expect you to forgive us right away, Olivia, but I hope we can somehow make up for the mistakes we've made. If you'll give us a chance." Olivia clenched her fists, her heart swirling with conflicting emotions. She'd once longed to hear these words, but she'd also wished never to face them again. Before she could respond, a small voice came from the stairs. "Sophie!" The little girl stood there, her curly hair falling over her shoulders, her big round eyes looking at her grandparents with confusion. She'd heard everything. No one spoke. No one knew how she'd react. Sophie looked at her mother, then at her grandparents. A long silence stretched out. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped down the stairs, her small feet moving slowly toward them. No one dared breathe. Sophie looked up at Diane, then at Robert. There was no blame, no resentment, just a pure gentleness only a child could possess. She reached out and gently hugged them. "I want to forgive you." Robert and Diane froze, as if they couldn't believe what had just happened. Then Diane broke into sobs. She knelt down, pulling Sophie into a tight embrace, her shoulders trembling. "Thank you, Sophie. Thank you." Robert knelt too, wrapping his arms around them both. Silent tears rolled down his weathered face. He said nothing, but the embrace carried all the apologies he could never voice. Olivia pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes stinging with tears. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, a silent show of support. In the months that followed, things slowly changed. No more lavish parties, no more glamorous lives, just simple evenings, warm meals, and honest conversations. One late winter afternoon, with Christmas approaching, the family gathered around the dining table, decorating the tree together. Sophie hung glittering ornaments. Ethan carefully placed a golden ribbon, and Olivia bustled in the kitchen preparing dinner. Robert and Diane sat on the sofa, watching their children and granddaughter. They no longer owned vast wealth, but they had something far more precious: family. Sophie carefully pulled out a small card and hung it on a green branch. Olivia stepped closer, curious about the words her daughter had written. Family is the greatest gift. Olivia smiled, tears glistening in the Christmas lights. A new Christmas arrived. No more extravagant lights, no more costly gifts. But this time, they had truly found the meaning of happiness.